This a multimedia project try to present different political practices in Vietnam cinema on the digital space, demonstrating different relationships between the formal and informal sectors of the industry, and how the pirate exploit the mainstream software infrastructure, especially Facebook, as the affordances to operate and profit. In this project, I will use Mozilla Hub as the affordance for the project. Mozilla Hub allows me to design the gaming experience and a gallery to present my research. This is a multimedia project that incorporates various media forms such as pictures, text, voice, videos, virtual reality, and game. You can also try watching this demo video and play the game at the same time. The rules of the game are voluntary. You have to always push either the A or D buttons to navigate through the game, instead of moving as you will. This restriction aims at delivering the effective experience of disorientation and able to fit into space. As it's voluntary, you can create your own rules to form a different disoriented effect or quick the gaming experience altogether and rather just explore the gallery. This pirate game includes 5 islands, representing 5 different media political practices in Vietnam cinema. First, let's try your best to move without enabling the fly mode. We first arrived at the vendor island. These were legitimate vendors that sold or rented political bootleg DVDs before the popularity of the digital access. I used the tool 360 a quick rectangular on the images to deliver the spatial effect of being at the stores. You can look around to see different titles hanging around and shelves of this. We start with this island to see how piracy has developed into the digital space, as well as dressing the spatial experience of this project. Because after this island, the interactive space is as flat as the computer screen, or the flat apparatus of a screen where cinema came from. This also addresses the temporalities of piracy in different eras that are condensed in this single project, from the days in the middle of the sea to the vendors in different digital spaces. Next, we will try our best to explore everything on the route before switching to the fly mode. The next island is the early platform island. It flourished in the period before the establishment of the global platforms like Facebook or Netflix. These websites have existed in the past and still survive healthily to this day. These are from the local networks and have different characteristics in terms of design, variety content, operation, and even monetization. I won't go deeper into each website, but will show certain indications of their differences. For example, this website asks the visitor to turn off ad block, a browser plugin to block advertisement, for it to monetize. This one has different design and look more simplistic, so their monetization may be different from the last one, as advertisements are minimal. In their policy, they clearly state that they use Facebook and Google infrastructures to store and analyze data, which reveals the essential business of Google and Facebook are not just a search engine or a social network, but selling big data. However, these websites use different tactics such as creating many accounts or using student accounts to avoid payment. Some of these resources are free to use by both Facebook and Google, despite the legitimacy of the subject. Here is another one just established in 2020. The design looks clean and simple. They don't have much in their policies, but clearly state that their content is not copyright. Okay, let's push the G button to start flying. Here's my walkthrough video on the website Filmer in my early project. I also attach it here for anyone who wants to know more details about how this type site operates. Next to it over here is an article from VN Express in June 2020, arguing for the decline of these sites due to the establishment of the legitimate platforms like Netflix or other domestic firms in Vietnam. You can also read more about it when visiting the gallery. Let's go back to the center. Now we're visiting the platformization island. This is the period in which the formal economies are on the race to integrate digital platform into their operation, and content delivery is one of the most important sectors. The period gave birth to many state and corporate-owned platforms, which have begun to take over the parasites like the last article argues. For this platform over here, you have to pay to access the content, but they have regional restriction. This proves that some of the content on this site may not be legitimate in some regions, and right now I'm in Canada. HTV is from the local state-owned corporation in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City. The corporation transformed its television network into a platform to explore the flexibility of the algorithm and the platformization trend. It has both live TV and library experiences on the platform. And this is the biggest city in Vietnam. A lot of its content reach national scale. Zing is another popular state-owned corporation in Vietnam. However, this one has a bad reputation for circulating pirated content in the past, so blocked in many regions around the world, including Canada. From this website, we step into the ranking of the most popular streaming services in Vietnam. Here, we have another TV turned platform corporation, but this one is private owned. K Plus is famous for its respect to copyright content and known as the strictest one in Vietnam when it started in 2009. Its features are high quality live sport content and other exclusive channels with high definition delivery. They bought own copyright from other channels and tried to monopolize on live sport when it came out. For the first time, the Vietnamese had to pay to watch live sport on television. Before, the copyright was owned by the public firms and pay TV broadcasting was a very new idea in Vietnam. This led to the spurring of bootleg access to live sport on over the internet. K Plus has begun introducing the intellectual property regime from the West to common Vietnamese perception. Moving forward is the national public-owned platform, VTV. This is second to the most popular one in the domestic sphere, as its content appeals to the interests of the national populations, which concentrates on Vietnamese programs and movies that are mostly funded by the government. It's free to access even outside the country and also monetized by advertisement. Moving to this one, FBT Play is the most popular platform in Vietnam. The private-owned platform from the biggest media corporation in the country features content that are included in other platforms as well, such as live sport, television, domestic and foreign content. It also has affiliation with K Plus and other foreign firms like HBO or Japanese anime. It has industrial design and in some way resembles to Netflix, which vigorous recommending and membership system. Though partly, it's also monetized by advertisement. However, you cannot use this platform outside the country as they require domestic phone number to sign up for an account. Therefore, foreign audiences are restricted to watch some domestic content, which leads to access to pirate websites. Over here is the ranking of the most popular streaming services in Vietnam. FBT Play is on the top despite not having international reach. And the second, you guessed it, Netflix. Despite having limited domestic library, its international reputation may have to secure its ranking. The excerpt from the article here argues that the lack of domestic content and keeping the expensive price tags make Netflix unfavorable to many Vietnamese. The question is, why Netflix is still second in the ranking despite all the shortcomings? We will look at it in the next Iceland. In the conclusion for this Iceland, this demonstrates the boundaries and relationship between the formal economies and the informal ones that are more shady and unclear than they look like, as the public and private-owned corporations sometimes act as the pirate themselves in certain cases, as well as the limitations of this platform that lead to piratical access. The next Iceland, a cow parasite Iceland, demonstrates the reason for the popularity and failure of Netflix to contain piracy, despite its rhetoric of introducing its platform IP regime to Vietnam in 2016. Any contract to release content on Netflix has strict copyright conditions that change the landscape of the industry from production to distribution and exhibition. Though we will look at part of it, how Netflix changes the landscape of the industry entirely is not the focus of this project. Here is an article from VN Express introducing a phenomenon in Vietnam that sells access to Netflix accounts for the price less than $1 for a month. This phenomenon strictly occurs to foreign platforms, as the domestic ones have more understanding for the Vietnamese consuming behavior and work closely with the government in terms of regulation and prosecution. Those access accesses to Netflix are cheap because someone can purchase a family subscription and sell access to other people. Again, you can read more about this article when visiting the gallery. As you can see, they advertise access everywhere on Facebook, mostly concentrated around popular Facebook pages and figures by commenting on their posts. They also sell access of other foreign platforms as well, such as Spotify, YouTube Premium, and even Pornhub or Grammarly. You may be aware that I duplicated some pictures to make the scene look as messy and disoriented as the way you see them when using Facebook. However, recently, there was a crackdown on this phenomenon by Facebook. Other streaming platforms also curved this phenomenon as well by terminating free trials in Vietnam. Despite all of this, the pirates still have their way by creating several Facebook groups and advertise directly by posting rather than just commenting, though it is no longer as pervasive as before. You can come to this group to ask for sellers as well. You can see this phenomenon resembling the transition of the street vendors that sell bootleg DVDs in the past, but on the digital space with the product of pirated accounts instead. They are culturally acceptable in some way, as the selling is very explicit and transaction through bank account. But of course, it is unacceptable to the platform that are being pirated. As a pirate game, I have a little treasure for you on this island. Going into the center of the field will reveal the secret behind all of these accounts. Yeah right, you may get scammed, so be careful. They may take your money and change the password, or account that have regional restriction, like the example of a Spotify account over here, saying that you need to live at the same address to access the account. This island continues demonstrating how the pirates exploit the infrastructure of the mainstream corporation to sustain their business, in this case on Netflix and Facebook again, but in a different way other than just data server. It's Facebook infrastructure of a social network and Netflix infrastructure of the whole streaming platform itself. This also shows the power dynamic relating to the IP regime, how it's perceived differently in different cultures, what is acceptable and what is not, which may change the understanding between the formal and informal relationship. Okay, let's move to the last island. Before going there, we will pass through a giant alien, which represents the illegality of the pirates, whose practices of everyday life are without the legal system of either national or international. The last island over here is called the Bootlegging Camp Island. This island presents how the bootlegging camp in the theater using the camcorder before moved to the digital space, thanks to the infrastructure of Facebook. Before the popularity of the digital space, bootlegging camp has already been the issues for the industry when movies are spoiled before finishing the theatrical window. One records a movie in the theater and makes a VHS or DVD copy later to sell in the vendors. For the advent of the digital space, those are uploaded to the pirate websites. Bootlegging camp in the age of social media live stream directly to Facebook while the patron is still in the theater. This may either complicate the matter or make it easier to spot the patron on the spot, while the theater implements rules and technology to spot the patron easier. Producer make how rules video to remind the patron that they may get hefty penalty from the government. The loop video over here is the compilation of how rules video that I collected. This includes both old-fashioned practice of using the camcorder as well as live stream one by the smartphone. After Netflix began to sign contracts with Vietnamese studios, crackdown on these practices has become more intense, though it has existed for a long time. This reveals how the IP regime from the West with its platform economy influences the exhibition practice in Vietnam. Despite the foreign platforms' failure to contain piracy themselves, the local industry take the blame to get foreign. The document over here demonstrates how serious the government wants to tackle these practices, partly because of the pressure from foreign investment. The island here ends as the spatial-temporal connection of the whole project, from the past to the present, or the development of different physical and digital spaces that can be seen in the practices of piracy over time, and the continuation of content piracy in the days of the street vendors. Though this is not a comprehensive study on media piracy in Vietnam, and rather an overview of certain practices, through this project, I was able to formalize different forms of media piracy in the region, their relationship to the formal economies, and the Western influences on the mediascape that create the changing dynamics of the formal and informal relationship over time. This helps to explore further specifically on each practice, or on media piracy in Vietnam in general, in my later projects. Okay, let's take a look at the whole place for the last time.